tell. Yes, I guess I am. And while I am, I want to find out about...
Too photogenic. I ate too much lunch.
I want to find out about that gift that Agnes gave you for your wedding? Is that what it was?
Wait, I didn't hear what you said.
I want to find out...
Well, when we got married in 1932, the people in Presto gave us a wedding shower, and Mrs. Reed gave us this strip, a very artistic strip made by the Indians, and I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't explained to me at the time, but I've kept it all these years, and found out that it's made by the Indians, and it's colored by berry juice. And it was quite an artistic piece. And I just decided to give it back to the family because I think it belongs in the family.
It's a beautiful
And
piece.
it's quite a treasure, I think.
Yeah.
And it's quite reminiscent of Mrs. Reed because she liked Indian lore and she was quite familiar with their lifestyles and everything. So I just thought it'd be nice to have in the family.
It's wonderful. Did she ever tell you who made it?
No,
Okay.
I never found out who
Yeah.
made it.
Yeah.
She just said the Indians made it, and so I assumed it was the Indians locally.
I'm sure it was.
But it's made out of tree bark and colored with berries.
Do you know what kind of berries?
I don't know what kind of berries.
Mm.
But the color lasted all these years, so it must have been quite a permanent colorization in the berries.
It looks almost new.
We wondered and wondered what it was.
I've never seen it before. No,
Really?
Mhm.
You got me on there again.
You can't
Well,
prove it.
I don't know who it was, but... And I wish now I'd asked her what it was.
Yeah.
And got more detail on it, but I felt so dumb because I didn't know what it was that I didn't ask her.
Daughters by that second Indian woman.
Well, Elle knew an Indian lady there that made all kinds of beadwork,
Oh, yeah.
and he had her make me a black and white bead necklace. And do you think I can find that?
Mm.
Huh.
I had it at the other place, and after we moved here, I just can't find it anywhere. And I've looked and looked and looked because I really like it.
Now tell me who's Emma Thompson.
She was the daughter of Beaver Dick's second marriage.
Okay.
And they had, I think, 7 kids. There was Bill, and Earl, and Myrtle, and Ralph, and Vera, and Carson. That's 6. Maybe that's all there were.
Where did they live?
Well, they lived across the river from the Reeds, over sort of in the John Jurgensen area. And the Carson and Vera and Ralph all went to school with me in the little one-room school.
Mm-hmm.
And Carson was a comedian. He had bright red hair and brown eyes, and he was just as crazy as could be. He was a real good guy, but he was funny. We all laughed and laughed at him because he said so many funny things. They were all musical. Earl used to play a banjo, I believe it was.
Yeah, he played the banjo.
Mm-hmm.
And these were Emma Thompson's kids?
Emma's kids.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I'm sure I've heard the name before, but then I probably thought of the other Emma, who was also Emma Thompson at one time.
Yeah. Yeah, she was. Mm-hmm.
I think he was a lot older than she was, wasn't he?
Bill and his wife, I think, are the ones that wrote this story about Beaver Dick.
And Dole was going with who?
Earl.
Earl.
He was a handsome guy.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happened to him all?
Well, I think probably all of them but Vera are gone. Carson died, and Ralph, I know, has died. And Earl, maybe Bill. No, I think it was Bill's son and his wife
Mm-hmm.
that did this story about Beaver Dick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but I think it was some relative.
Now, I was going to say the kids, they're still kids probably around, but you just don't know about...
Well, I'm sure that Carson had a big family, I believe. He married a gal. Her name was Lorinda, and she was the prettiest lady, and I really did like her. She was nice gal.
Well, now didn't he have red hair?
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't look like the rest of them at all.
Well, Beaver Dick had red hair.
Oh, did he?
I read someplace where Beaver Dick had red hair. He was English.
Well, in fact, I was going to say he's from Scotland.
Well, maybe so,
But, yeah, maybe it was English. I can't remember.
but he
sure.
had red hair, and that's where Carson got his red hair. He had brown eyes, but he had fiery red hair.
He had freckles.
Yeah. And I know Chick and Eldro used to tease me and Jerry after the twins were born and they had red hair, and Kim was born, he had red hair too. And I used to kid us about Carson Thompson coming over across the river.
I forgot all about him.
It hasn't been many years since he died, maybe 3 or 4, and Gwen and Vin, and I don't know whether Doug went down, but some of them anyway went down to the funeral. It was in Pocatello.
I just totally forgot about him till you mentioned him.
But I know back in the Depression days when we had the Happy-Go-Lucky Club, they put on a minstrel show. And Glenn and Carson Thompson did the Two Black Crows deal.
Oh, God.
And everybody in the country just thought that was wonderful. They just would talk about that and talk about it. And
Too bad you couldn't have videoed that.
well, I didn't even get to see it. That's when I was working in Blackfoot.
Oh.
And I didn't get to see it, but everybody said it was so good.
That would be funny.
Also, this Emma Thompson, that was her married name,
Yeah.
because Beaver Dick was Richard Lee.
Mm-hmm. So she was Emily.
Interesting. I thought of him the other day because there was a special on television about asteroids. Now, this is all going to come together. And You know, how the big one in Siberia hit back in the teens, something like that, and how the one hit down along the Yucatan Peninsula eons ago and destroyed the dinosaurs and such. But one of the pictures they had of an asteroid skimming across the Earth through the sky was taken at Jenny Lake. Just a guy was just there with his little film camera, and here it came, just zipping across, and he just panned right across with it. And it just skipped through the atmosphere and went right on out. Vanda saw it, too. Mm-hmm. It was not that many years ago. It was back in the 70s sometime. But Jenny Lake is named after Beaver Dick's first wife.
Yep. And then Lee Lake.
It's named after him.
Named after him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
And it's not Jenny's, it's Jenny.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jenny
Yeah.
Lake.
Yeah. Well, here we are talking about history a little bit. And when you two were little girls, you certainly heard about Oregon Trail and pioneers and all of that, and that was history to you. Did you ever think your life would be history?
I guess it is.
Well, sure it is, and everybody's will be, but they don't think of that.
Yeah.
And I suppose...
Well, that's the reason I want these stories put together for the kids and the grandkids. There's nothing fantastic about them, but I think that I wish I had something like that to read about my kids.
To know more about Grandpa and Grandma.
Yes, and my folks.
Grandpa and Grandma Pratt.
Yeah.
I'd give anything to know a little bit more about them,
I'd
because
like to read.
you take all this for granted when you're a kid. You just think they'll be around forever, and then when they're gone, you have nobody to ask. Nobody knows any more than you do about it.
Well, what do you know? What do you know about them?
Well, that they were early pioneers of, they came across with covered wagons, and they originated in Wales, didn't they?
In England.
And Grandma, somebody told me she was a seamstress on the wagon train. Maybe that was great-grandma, was it?
I don't know.
And then, I think it was my great-grandfather that was in Utah when they drove the Golden Spike that connected the east and the west railroads. He was there at that time. And I've seen pictures of that, but of course I didn't know him well enough to, and there were just throngs of people, so it'd be hard to pick somebody out. But I understand he was there. And they settled in Brigham City, Utah. And I guess...
I thought it was Ogden.
Huh?
I thought it was Ogden.
Well, I guess Ogden and then Brigham City, because my dad was born in Brigham City.
Well, tell us some names. What were their names?
Joseph Pratt was my father's name, and my grandfather's name was Joseph Pratt.
Okay.
And I guess he was a stonemason. And I guess some of the buildings are still standing around Salt Lake that he helped build. And of course Mel, my sister Mabel Anderson, was curious enough to go around and find all these buildings.
Oh, good for her.
And see the writing on them, so she was sure that he was the one that helped build them. And I guess they had a pretty rough time because he was away from home a lot. And then Grandma died when Pop was only 4 years old or 6 years old.
And Annie was less than a year old anyway.
And Annie was just a baby. keep all the kids together because he said he'd never let them be separated, but Aunt Annie was sickly, and a neighbor lady took care of her all the time, and she wanted to adopt her. And my grandfather didn't want the kids separated, but it finally came to the point where he was away working so much that he thought the baby would be better off with, was her name Mrs. Olson?
White.
White, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually went to Garland, Utah, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad was, I guess Grandpa died fairly young, and so Uncle Billy, Uncle Jim, Uncle Harry, and Aunt Hattie, and my dad, Joseph, were all without parents. And Aunt Hattie tried to take care of them the best she could.
Well, she went to live with
She went
Whites
to,
and took care of Aunt Annie a lot when she was little.
But she later came back and kind of got the family all back together again, and then they moved to Snake River Valley eventually, all of them.
Dad and Uncle Jim and I think your dad probably came before Aunt Hattie and Uncle Ellis, because they came up on a freight train, I believe it was, from Ogden, brought their stuff up on the freight train, and they lived with Mom and Dad for a little while till they got a place fixed for themselves.
So none of them had an easy life. They were just all had to make their own lives and homestead in Idaho in about, 1908?
Well, Mom and Dad were there before that. I think they came about 1898 into Blackfoot. They lived at Soda Springs for a while, and then they came over to Blackfoot.
Well,
I think Uncle Jim came first, and then they came after that.
And they all homesteaded,
and there wasn't any of the good land left, so they took the old sandy part.
they brought water on the place, and they grubbed sage, and they made fields, and they raised alfalfa, and got a few cattle. My dad he was considered quite wealthy. He had 200 head of 200 head of cattle?
I don't know.
And Mom came from Holland. And they met then,
And what was her name?
Marie Adler. And she married my dad in about 1908. And her sister and my dad's brother, Uncle Harry and Aunt Bessie, were married at the time, and they lived close by on a ranch. And so they started, sort of instigated the marriage of my dad and my mother. And Mom was a little city girl. She was only 19 years old, never been out in the country, and she was scared to death of Indians. And when my dad would be out in the field, the Indians would come begging, the squaws, and they always had big gunny sacks, and they'd hold them out and tell Mom they wanted food. So Mom would give them loaves of bread and canned food, anything she could find, because she was afraid if she didn't, they'd scalp her. So she baked bread all the time, and she didn't have locks on the doors, so she couldn't lock the doors. So she just feed them everything she could get hold of. And I guess they came around quite often, so. And my dad was friendly with all the Indians. He told her not to be afraid of them, but she was anyway. She was just scared to death of them.
I can understand how that would be, because all of the dime lot novels and such. At that time, the Indians were the savages, the bad folks, and
Yeah. They used to come through our place. One old Indian especially. He'd come with his old ratty team and buggy and a bunch of yapping dogs. He had always managed to get there just as we were going to sit down to dinner. Dad would always invite him to come in, and Mom would just as soon have not had him, but she'd fix up a plate for him and set him out in the kitchen. She didn't invite him to come in to sit at the table with us, but she always fed him out in the kitchen.
Who was that automobile?
Oh, no. No, that was,
That was way before
oh,
automobile.
yeah. No, I don't think anybody ever invited automobile in.
Oh, my dad did.
Or did he?
My dad would invite everybody in the house. Everybody was welcome at our house. And this old automobile Tavish, was a kind of a retarded Indian.
oh,
And everybody kind of took care of him. But my dad always felt sorry for everybody. And he had him come in and eat with us. And Mom begrudged that. She didn't like him in there because she was always afraid that he'd hurt one of us kids. But he used to help in the crops, and he'd always sit at the table and eat with all the other hired men. And one day Mom offered him, well, he ate all the cream cake he could hold, and there was some left, and just before he got up from the table, he grabbed that piece of cream cake and stuffed it in his pocket.
Well, we never did have automobile work for us, but I can remember when he came once and scared me. I was there alone, and I saw him coming, and I had my first paycheck from teaching on the table downstairs. I hadn't put it in the bank yet. And I thought, oh Lord, what am I going to do? And so I ran upstairs and went into Glenn's room, the one on the north here. Then I raised the window. I called out of the window and I said, who are you looking for? And he was looking for Frank. And I said, well, Frank doesn't live here. And I showed him where Frank lived over on the farm. He stood around there for a while, but he finally left.
He was a real weird Indian. He'd just sit and giggle, and there'd be nothing to laugh about, but he'd see something funny and he'd just sit there and giggle. But he was a pathetic guy. He was...
Oh, it's all kind of disfigured and
kind of, he was just, I think his family kind of disowned him, and he
Yeah.
was just kind of a bum.
they didn't have much to eat anyway, and I don't think he ever had enough to eat. I
But
think that
Pop brought everybody in. He always said, well, a poor feller is hungry, bring him in and feed him. So Mom would have to feed him. But she did it very reluctantly because she didn't like him. And that old guy that used to come by selling neckties, Charlie Roar.
Oh, Charlie Roar, yes.
He sold neckties and what else? But he'd come around and he was a mess. But Pop would invite him in, come on in and spend the night. He'd always have a bed for him out in the bunkhouse. And Mom would have to cook him a meal. So my dad was that way. He fed everybody that came along. Everybody was welcome in our house. And on Sundays, Mom always cooked a big Sunday dinner, and people, no matter where they were going or where they were coming from, They always stopped by at our place to eat dinner. Mom used to say, I'd like to just have one Sunday that we could sit down by ourselves and eat dinner.
What use did farmers have for ties? I mean, Sundays and such, but I would think you couldn't make much of a living selling neckties.
Well, he had something else, but what in the devil was it? I can't remember what. I can remember him, but I can't remember what he sold. I know he was a traveling salesman, but I can't remember what he sold besides neckties. But he had to sell something because he couldn't have made a living on selling neckties.
I don't know what else he sold, but he was a real oddball, and Mom always gathered all of us kids around her whenever he came over because she didn't want us to be around him very much. She was always kind of leery of him. But Pop always brought all these weird people in because he always thought they were hungry and they needed some food. And then Boozy, do you remember Boozy?
Yes. Old Boozy, yes, I can remember Boozy.
Mr. Boozenbark.
Oh.
You probably heard of him.
No, but these names fascinate me.
He was another grubby character.
He lived up in the hills.
He
Had a ranch up in the hills.
Yeah, and he always smelled like sagebrush. And he recited poetry.
His own?
And
Or?
Jody thought he was the elite of all the people he knew. He thought Boozy, he really looked up to Boozy. And here Boozy was a dirty, grubby little guy, and he'd live up in the mountains and come down, and he looked like he hadn't had a bath for 3 or 4 months.
But when, was it Six-Shooter Sal that used to live up there
Yeah,
with him? And I
think
don't know
so.
whether she was his wife or what, but she was the darndest looking wild woman I
Oh,
ever
she
saw.
looked like H.
Why did they call her that?
Six-Shooter Sal?
Sure.
Well, I guess she used to have 6 shooters.
Mm-hmm. And this Boozy in his poetry, did he write poetry or just read it and recite it?
He'd read, you know, that poem of In Texas down by the Rio Grande?
Yeah.
He used to recite that, and
Ah.
he put so much feeling and meaning into it, you'd be spellbound.
Really?
Because here was this little grubby mountain man just fresh out of the hills and smelling so awful you could hardly have him in the room with you. And he was an orator. The way he read poetry or recited poetry was just really something else. And Mel wrote me a letter here a while back, and she said, do you remember when Boozy used to recite poetry? And Jody learned part of it, but he never could put it over. And Mel found a copy of this poem, and she sent it to Gary, because Gary recites poetry
Sure.
real well. And she wondered if he'd be interested in learning how to read it.
And these two lived up in the mountains, you say, do you know?
Yeah.
Where?
Kind of up around where we used to go fish. Up,
Brush
the beaver
Creek?
ponds, up by, where we used to get the key from what was his name? But used to hide the key, but he told your dad where it was, and
I remember that.
so we'd go and get the key out from under this rock and go fish in the beaver ponds.
Yeah.
But it was up in that area someplace that
I don't
old Boozy lived.
I don't know exactly where that area is. I remember fishing with Pop up in Poison Creek. But Poison Creek was not a brushy creek. It was out through a meadow.
This was, you go up over the Wolverine Divide
Okay.
and get on the Bone Road and drive down. It was on, not Sellers Creek, but,
Rollins?
no. Oh shoot, what was it?
other creeks up there. I know there's Beaver Creek.
No, it wasn't Beaver Creek. Maybe it was up to Sawmill or something they called it.
I can remember that, but not much. Now, the names are really fascinating. There seem to be more nicknames at that time than there is today. I suppose Automobile's name was his name.
Well, yeah, that was his real name. Automobile Tavish.
Tavashee's a pretty name.
Abishee.
Mm-hmm. What other Indian names do you remember?
Tetons, Nugget Size, and, there were others over there too that, I can't think of them right now, but there were a lot of them.
How do you spell Tavashee?
Tavashee, I guess.
Don't suppose you spelled it much.
No, didn't have any occasion to.
And there were a couple of Tavashees still around when I was, that were always hitchhiking up and down the road.
Oh, yes.
Who were they? It was a woman and like her brother, wasn't it?
Nanny and what was his name? Oh, I tell you, one night after I'd had a class in Blackfoot, there were three of us, Lorraine Taylor and one of the Scott's daughters, Eldon Scott's daughter. And I had gone to class in Blackfoot, and we had finished, and we were so elated to be through with that class every week. And we crossed the river, or crossed the railroad there at Wapello. And there was somebody lying along the road, and Lorraine said, "Oh, my Lord, stop. There's a woman dead along the road." And we stopped the car. I think
Was it nighttime?
Yeah. And we stopped the car, and we backed up, and we could see that the woman was lying there, and we could see across the ditch, it was kind of halfway moonlight, we could see somebody sitting across there. And we were just scared to death, and we didn't know what to do. And pretty soon the woman woke up, and she started singing, "God Bless America."
Was she drunk?
She was drunker than and it was Nanny Tavashee. And she was just as drunk as she could be. And then he crawled across what was his name? We used to say the two names together.
Yeah. I remember.
No, I can't.
And they were brother and sister, weren't they? Or were they married, or I don't recall.
I guess they were married. I don't know. They shouldn't be anyway.
Well, Automobile was never married. Was
No, he wasn't. But we didn't know what to do, but we decided to drive up to Leon Siemens's. You know, they used to live where the Ormonds used to live. We drove up there, and I had him call the sheriff, because they were out on the road and they were just so drunk. And so the sheriff came out, and the sheriff took them back over to their place, and we came on home. Because somebody would have killed them. They were right out in the middle of the road, and they were both just so drunk they couldn't stand up, and somebody would have hit them.
My gosh.
And as I recall, he outlived her. And I can remember even hearing on the news something about finding him in a ditch sometime between Idaho Falls and Blackfoot.
Yeah, I can remember.
Not dead, but in bad shape in the winter or something.
What in the dickens was his name?
Mike.
Mike and Nanny.
Mike, that's right.
Mike and Nanny, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mike Tavishy and Nanny. And I guess Nanny was, not his sister, but, she was related to him some way, I believe.
Did they live out on the reservation?
Mhm.
They did, didn't they?
Across from Granddad's.
Well, for some reason I got the idea they weren't married anyway. I thought they
Well,
were like
they
brother and
probably
sister or
weren't.
something, but
But they used to walk every place. And I can remember once when I was going to school over to Riverview, I guess,
mhm.
and they hailed me along the road, and I gave them a ride to Firth.
Oh, you did?
I remember that. I
Were
was
you
with
in
you.
the car?
Yeah.
Oh.
We took them over to Firth.
Well, you knew who they were and that they weren't dangerous.
They weren't dangerous, they
No,
were
I know.
stupid, but they weren't dangerous.
Well, Automobile was, he was as rum-dum as they come, but he was harmless, I think.
Mhm.
He was just pathetically
Yeah.
ringy.
I was trying to think of the Indian that we used to have come and work for us quite a bit. And he used to come in and eat at the table. He wasn't bad at all. And he used to help in the hay and with the thrashing and all that. Oh, what ridiculous.
Spud digging, they were always there for spud harvest. But just to give you an example of my dad, one time a guy came to our door, and you know all the guys from the state institution in Blackwood had their heads shaved. And this guy came to the door with his head shaved, and Mom was just scared to death of him, but Pop invited him in to eat. So he worked for us for a few days, and he slept out in the bunkhouse with Pop put Jody and this guy out in the bunkhouse. Jody slept out there all the time, but he let this prisoner, guy from the insane asylum, sleep with Jody there. And as soon as Pop gave him a paycheck at the end of 2 or 3 days, he disappeared. We never saw him again. But my dad brought everybody in the house. He felt so sorry for everybody that looked like they weren't stuffed full. He'd bring them in and have Mom cook him a meal.
That's where you get it.
Ingawanup was another Indian name.
Oh, Ingawanik, yeah. Oh, Roy Ingawanik.
Ingawanup.
Hmm.
Uncle Jim used to be real friendly with all of the Indians. Ingawanup. And then we had what the dickens was that one that used to work for us? He was pretty good. I can't remember his name.
And then at one time, Vernon's folks lived out on whose place was that? It's by J. Berkeley Larson's place.
They're on the corner where Glenn Cook used to live.
Mhm.
They lived there for a while, and they hired some Indians to help with the harvest. And this one squaw was pregnant, and Vernon's dad didn't know whether to let her work or not, but she insisted on working. I think they were picking spuds. And it was time for her to have her baby, and she just went off in the weeds and had her baby, came right back and started picking spuds again. Childbirth was just all in a day's work for them, and she went right on working.
While you're sitting right there, tell me about that clock that you told me about this morning.
Picture clock.
Does it run?
It runs, but you know, when Vernon was here, he fooled with it so much that I had it put in the bedroom so that he insisted it would run, and he fooled with it all the time, and I was afraid he'd break it, so I just kind of hid it from him.
Well, let's hear the story.
Am I on?
You're on.
Well, that clock, my grandfather brought from Holland in 1908, and he wouldn't check it with the rest of the belongings. He wrapped it in a quilt and carried it all the way from Holland on the ship. They were on the ocean, on the SS Republic, for 21 days. That's how long it took to get to the United States at that time. And he had that clock wrapped up in a quilt and carried it all that time. And even in Boston, they disembarked in Boston, and they couldn't understand American language very well, and the authorities asked them if they believed in polygamy, and they thought they had to be agreeable to everything. So they said yes, they did believe in polygamy, and so they put him in jail. And they spent the first couple of nights in jail, the whole family, Grandpa and Grandma, and Mom, and Uncle Renus, and Aunt Eva, and 2 kids. They put them all in jail.
And were they Mormon?
Yeah, they were Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't believe in polygamy, but they didn't know what the authorities were talking about, and they just thought they better be agreeable. And so they were in jail, and the Mormon missionaries then came and bailed them out.
Mm-hmm.
Mother had it for a long, long time after my grandfather passed away, and then when Mom died, I got the clock, and now I suppose someday Jeannie will have it. So it's going on down through the family.
And I put things in here that there's a clipping from Aunt Agnes.
Oh, yes, you call them. Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is that took that,
Oh, that Marlene took.
yeah,
Yes.
Marlene took.
Sure.
I got those in here. She sent me the copies of,
Oh, there's a copy of this. Yes.
oh, that's a copy of that.
Uh-huh. Little poem.
Memorial. And that's a cabin.
Huh. I don't think I've seen that one before.
It used it for Christmas card event.
Mm.
Barbara. It's that picture of Marlene.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, the postcard.
Uh-huh.
And this is M&M, that's Mabel and Mylan
Sure. Doug?
from Doug, and that's about her death.
Oh, yes.
That's Doug's letter. You'd probably like to read it.
I would. Sure.
You can have it if you watch it. think this is still from Doug about Agnes.
Oh. Oh. This one's about Mylan.
That's his dearest love, Aunt Agnes. She dated.
Look up a minute, everybody.
She dated at 72. It's Mabel and Mabel. That is a form to mine. That's from Manny and Bloomington. And is that 1980? 1958, isn't it? 1950. 1950.
Do you ever remember Agnes wearing pants?
Home once in
Pants?
a while, but not very long.
This letter talks about her. I have a pantsuit, 3-piece, cranberry red, gay blouse. It is a fat woman design and really looks nice. I cannot believe I like pants on me. That was
Yeah.
from 72.
She finally got so she did wear them.
Uh-huh.
Dayton County, 1955. That was in the DUP book. And Agnes. This is Mylan. This means Mylan. Oh, it's Madeline Lindbergh's diary, July 16th, 1933. Oh. And it's something she said. It is marvelous to watch a man who knows exactly what he has to do and knows that he can do it.
As you go up to Mylan. Yeah, she admired Anne Lindbergh so much.
Yeah.
The day after the funeral from Doug.
I've got the letter that he wrote to me after I wrote the tribute to her in the paper.
Oh, you do? Oh, I thought maybe the university would take that letter from longer ago.
Oh,
Or do it, but it was long enough for you to think about. Doug. Is that Doug?
yep.
Oh. Officers Scholarship Committee. Peter Smith,
Esther Lay,
Ruth Ray, Mrs. Ruth.
Ruth Ray, Grace Williams, and Lorraine Judd. Officers from Pocatello were P. Howard, Mrs. Pearl Olberg, Mrs. That should be you, McGonagall, and Dr. Alan Steinberg. Yeah, we used to have good times at those dinners when we had what the book is telling people.
Well, these things, I guess I just put them in this book.
Sure.
To preserve them.
That's interesting. This one letter from Doug talks about a book of poetry that Agnes wanted to, was working on when she passed away,
Oh.
and what she wanted to call it.
Well, this is a letter I put on this.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. Sure.
This is the cover.
Yeah. Hers needs to be rebound before it's covered, I think. So that's.
Yeah, it should be. I suppose this looks just like the others that you see, yellow.
Oh, sure. Sure.
But if they make another one and use these illustrations, I'll be so thrilled.
Well, I think that's what we're planning. And it'll be very easy to use them. They would.
Yeah, and I
They-
wanna,
Photograph just
I
fine.
wanna see,
Well, she just put a cover on it.
but I wonder if that,
It'd help.
you see, I've got this old book
Yeah.
that my folks had,
Uh-huh.
but the cover has,
Well, I
It'll
don't
fall
know whether
apart.
it'll take one of these, but if it isn't in too bad shape. I don't know whether to. No, I don't.
See, that one's.
I don't know whether to. If I tried to take this off,
it
well,
will-
no, you'd
I
like to
think
do
you just
that.
keep it on.
I'll have to leave it on now
Sure.
because it'll come right
Okay.
off.
I'll have to see if we can
Find
get
a way to do it.
get a piece of
Well-
hide or something, and
Sure.
it wouldn't be hard to sew it.
There are also bookbinders who will do a special job of rebinding the book, and I think it's a special enough book that we should.
I must
See about
put
that.
this on the sewing machine.
Yeah, it looks like it.
But the book is in really good shape otherwise,
Other than the cover,
but the
sure.
cover is
Uh-huh.
Sure.
pulled off.
Well,
Sure.
that's it.
And then I've got the other one, the middle
And
one.
I don't know whether Carol is a long, long way from family. You know, I told her I was going to send $300. And she says, don't send in anything. Those cowboys out on the river got money. You got money. They're wealthy. They can take care of it. I thought when I told her, she'd say, well, I'll send some money. She's a millionaire, I know. And I thought she'd send you some money. But no, she
Yeah.
bawled me out for sending money.
They're probably not near as wealthy as she thinks they are. But it was really appreciated.
Well, I'd like to send more. I know I do.
Our next project, since we've got the roof done, I shouldn't say we, because they did it all themselves. Fred and Finn and everyone, and some of the kids.
Oh, I didn't think that boys would be up like that would get up there.
It scared me to think about it.
Fred and Alma said they got up there, Fred and Alma and Doug got up there the day before and tore all the old shingles off.
Oh my gosh! Oh,
And
really?
then the rest of them came the next day and they put the shingles back on.
That's.
Well, there's another roof to go, huh?
There's another side.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the one that has the old metal on it.
And that was the kitchen.
Yes. Yes. Do you remember when that metal roof was put on? Fred said he didn't think that anybody could remember. He says he thought it was way early.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
must have been. Because it's probably original, it must have been in the original.
It's, the original is underneath it.
Oh,
This was apparently put on after,
oh,
but it must have been
I don't
around the
remember.
turn of the century
No.
sometime. Yeah.
I wouldn't remember that. That could have been done, that was Melly.
Well, that's possible.
Well, nobody can remember it though.
Yeah, Fred said he couldn't
That
remember.
was over 60 years.
Yeah, Fred said he couldn't remember when it wasn't on there, so that's,
Well, the middle is still holding.
I guess. I haven't been in the house since 1976, so I don't know what it's like inside, if it's leaking or
Then they
anything.
keep it locked, I guess.
I guess,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say, you have a right to go, and I wish you would.
Oh, well, I sure want to.
I'd love to go through it again.
I should do, and I really want to make sure that everything that's in there is preserved.
I remember the big map.
Oh, that's
Oh,
so
that's what-
wonderful.
That's what
Yes.
Kim said when we were out in Seattle.
Yeah.
He said that big map in the wall, on the wall in the hall is what I remember.
No.
That concerns me, because that's
And then,
oilcloth.
there was a Navajo, and there was a Navajo in the living room, it was small.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And there's a library table in the living room, and you know what? That was our library in the village when we had it.
Oh,
Yeah.
My mother and father bought that library table.
Oh.
After we were all gone and married and weren't coming back,
Yes.
they moved it up to the old home,
uh-huh.
and they put it in the living room.
I can
It was
remember
the
the
last time I was
library.
in there, I knew that was our old old
For heaven's sakes.
library table.
And
Now,
the old organ.
it belonged to the village.
That's
That's
good
it.
to know. That's why we've got this tape on. We've already forgotten about it.
And I wonder if it's the big old
Post office?
desk goes
Yeah,
up. and-
yes.
You bet
I think it's still there.
The old organ.
Oh, the old organ, I used to play it.
Did you?
I used to play it.
And the big old bed with the treble bed.
Yes.
The little bed up.
Yes.
That hooked on the foot.
Oh,
That was there the last time I was in, but that's been a long time since I've been there. Oh,
I didn't know that.
God.
I was taking those pictures
oh, I don't, how long's it been on?
all the time.
Oh, yeah, it's just running.
Well, I don't know, I started to say, I don't think Carol, gives a snap about some of this old stuff like we do. And
Oh, I don't suppose she does. She
I
didn't
was
grow up
hoping
with it like we did.
I could strap these together somehow and put a label on them to go probably to you, and you could put them in the archives.
Well, we'd certainly be delighted to do that. Now, would you do one favor?
Yeah.
Would you at least sign one of those for the art? With your name?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
This
This one, yeah, that